This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight, June.
Hi, my name's June. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, June.
Hi. I want to thank Dave for asking me and having me over here. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I am just so amazed at the life that I have. You know, I have to tell you, I think what amazes me the most is not really just the life that I have. It's that I live a life that I never would have wanted, and I'm a person that I wouldn't have even liked when I came to AA. And what's so amazing to me about that is that most of the time I'm pretty happy with who I am and with what's going on in my life. And I was never happy. I was never happy. I wasn't happy before I started drinking. I wasn't even happy really when I was drinking, you know. And I certainly wasn't happy in the early years of my sobriety. You know, I really want to thank all the people that shared with their cakes, you know, because I really think that anybody who was listening to that really, as I heard the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. Anything that I'm going to talk about, really, I'm just going to be kind of saying whatever they said. I'll just take longer to do it. I think, you know, for me, I was thinking about it, you know, my heroes are in Alcoholics Anonymous. My life has been touched by the people here, you know, and running into Bob and getting a chance to sit and talk with him tonight, you know, just for a little bit and remembering. And I suppose, Bob and I were talking about that, you know, that I suppose for each of us in our own way, whoever's here when we get here, these are the people that means so much, you know, because they gave us the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I think a lot about the people that were here and the people who tolerated me in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I want to welcome the new people. Those who stood up, and if there might be some who didn't. I don't think I would have stood up, you know, but I'm glad that you guys did, and I want to welcome you. I want to start out by saying a couple of things that I think are the most important thing that I might say all night long. And that way, in case you're like me, or certainly like I used to be, but even like I am sometimes, and you only are going to listen for a minute or two, you know, I want to say the most important things right now. And that is that I am not an expert on alcoholism, on Alcoholics Anonymous, or certainly on anything else that I'm going to stand up here for a little while and talk about tonight. And neither is anybody else that's sharing in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're just members, you know. And I also want you to know, because people get here so many different ways these days, and I really don't think it matters how people get to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, but just in case it got anywhere complicated along the line and anybody was, you know, asking you for money or, you know, contributions or anything else, I want to be really clear. Alcoholics Anonymous is absolutely free. Had it not been free, I never could have come here. Had it not remained free, I never could have stayed. I was over 10 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous before I could afford to put $1 in the basket, and there were a hell of a lot of years even after that I couldn't put $1 in the basket. So this is not about money. And I just want to make sure, you know, I don't care how you got here or whether it cost you money to find AA, but I want you to be very clear that Alcoholics Anonymous itself is absolutely free. I talked at a meeting, and it's been a while ago now, at 26th and Broadway, and this guy came up to me and he thanked me afterwards, and he said, I think he was thanking me mainly because the guy in back of him had told him to, but anyway, he said, you know, I want to thank you for your talk. He said, I thought that was a good story. He said, I don't really believe it was your story, but I liked the way that you told it. And I have never forgotten that, because I thought, wow. What a tribute to Alcoholics Anonymous, that someone could actually doubt that I came from where I came from. Because I really want to assure you that when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I looked like my story. And I looked like my story for a hell of a long time after I was sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I think we all earn our story. I mean, you know, we get here in a certain way. I grew up in Venice, and I grew up in an alcoholic home, and there was a lot of violence in my home, and there were a lot of broken promises in my home, and there were a lot of the kind of things that go on in anybody's alcoholic home, maybe not all of them, but certainly what was going on in mine. My mom was a bar drinker, and I grew up hanging out in a lot of the bars in Venice, because that's where we went. And you know, when I was a little kid, and I kind of look at different people, and I saw that men and women in the world handled the exact same situations very differently. In my life before coming to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I never saw a man cry. I thought that meant men never felt any pain. I've seen men shot, I've seen them stabbed, I've seen them arrested, I've seen them, be taken to jail, I've seen their kids overdose, I've seen their wives leave them. I've seen a lot of things happen, and I never saw a man shed a tear under any of those circumstances. I saw the women in my life going through those same situations, and some of them seemed to be pretty tough at some point, but they also all seemed to have a breaking point. And I looked at those two different groups of people, and I decided immediately which one I wanted to be like. And I spent all my life, before coming to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and some of it after I got here, trying to be what I thought a man was, trying to not care about anybody, trying to not let anybody know that they mattered, trying to not let anybody know that anything could hurt me. It was really important to me because I thought that meant that I couldn't get hurt if I didn't let anybody know. And interestingly enough, I suppose, it's one of those things that I've heard Clancy share about in meetings before. I was one of those people that seemed to have been born without any insulation at all for my emotions, so that absolute strangers could look at me funny or tease me when I went to school about being tall or skinny or having curly red hair or whatever it was. And it hurt so much that I can't even really describe it. It was just ridiculous. That this stranger could hurt me by teasing me about something, But it hurt so much that I found out that the earliest memories that I have of myself were that I was the thing that I hated the most in the entire world, that I was weak, that absolute strangers could make me feel things that I did not want to be feeling. I never really forgave myself for that, and I am so grateful that I was introduced to drugs when I was 7 years old. I began to drink on a regular basis when I was 8 years old. By the time I was 9, I found a combination that I never altered in any way, and some of you may not identify with it, but it was my, combination, and that was downers or reds or yellows or barbiturates, whatever you call them, and alcohol. I never didn't get drunk. I almost never didn't overdose. I just didn't know what the point was. I thought that's what they were for. And I don't have a funny, drunkalog. I don't have a lot of cute stories, of things that I did. If you drank the way that I drank and you used the things that I used, you don't have a very interesting drunkalog either, I just kind of laid around. I threw up. That's really about all I did. I wasn't drinking really to feel good. And I know a lot of people in AA are not going to identify with that. I was drinking to not feel anything at all. And I am extremely grateful that alcohol worked that way for me, because I truly believe I would have had to have been locked up in some kind of an institution had I not found alcohol and had it not worked that way for me. I don't believe that there were any days before I came to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I didn't try and take my own life, pray to a God that I was slowly losing faith in to please let me die, or put myself in a position where someone else would take my life. I wanted out. And I've done inventory in the years that I've been sober, and I really look back on that time, and I can tell you that although some of my suicide attempts were to try and get attention, by and large, I wanted to die. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to be anything. I didn't want to grow up. I didn't want anything in life. I wanted out. And I'm so grateful that I had alcohol to just take off how much pain I was in all the time, until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. In growing up, they'd say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, a boy. And it wasn't as easy to do back then as it is today. But I really meant it, and so they got very concerned, and I thought that was kind of strange. So my family began to take me to priests to counsel me, and we were on welfare, so they found out that they could take me to psychiatrists and psychologists, because I kept cutting my wrists and beating my face with a hammer and taking these overdoses and drinking the way that I was drinking and just trying to get out, And I really don't have any kind of a diagnosis to give you about what those, kind of professionals thought about me, because I always felt about those kind of people like my friend Patty Hicks did. I thought those people should have to work for their money, and I never told them anything. I never filled out one form. I never played with one doll. I had nothing to say to those people, I just sat there the required 50 minutes, and when we were done, I got up and I left. And so I wasn't able to get help in that way. I kind of looked around the world, and I thought, well, the only option for someone like me, if I couldn't be a boy, was to be a tough broad. And I spent my time in Venice Beach trying to be what I thought a tough broad was. And I've kind of learned over the years, I've traveled a little bit in AA and gone to some different conferences and stuff, and I've learned that tough broads have, like, there's geographical things, you know what I mean? Like tough broads in Nebraska dress really different than tough broads at Venice Beach. But in Venice Beach, the way I saw it, you know, I'm sure there's variations there too, but, you know, it was really important that you have tough feet. Tough broads have tough feet. And so we did not wear shoes. And I would stand down there on the boardwalk with my gang, because I was in a gang, because if you're going to be a tough broad, you need to be in a gang. And so I would stand there with my gang, and I would look people, you know, in the eye, these touristy-looking people, because it's very important you look people in the eye till they look away. And I would take my cigarette, and I would throw it down on the boardwalk, and I would put it out with my bare feet. And these touristy-looking people would whisper back and forth to one another, and I knew what they were saying. They were saying, wow. That is one tough broad. And I was very impressed that I could do this. And then after I'd been sober for a while, my sponsor said to me, you know, maybe what some of those people were saying to one another is, did you see that? That person just put flesh to fire. You know, why would anybody do anything so stupid? You know, but I thought it was tough, so I did it all the time, you know, and being able to walk down an alley where there was glass. You know, these things were important. And those were my values, you know. Anyway, I was in a gang. I did do a lot of fighting. It's important for me to always remember to let you know that I have never won a fight in my life. But I have never fought less than 5 people at a time. And again, after I, you know, was talking to my sponsor, she explained to me, you know, if you fight one person and you lose, someone might think you're not a very good fighter. It could be said about you, right? But if you fight groups of 5 or more, no one expects you to win. And they kind of think maybe she is kind of tough, maybe, because why would that many people have to jump her? You know, so it was that kind of a thing. I think that's what I was going for, you know. I found out for me that because I had no insulation emotionally, that I would much rather you punch me in the face than hurt my feelings. And so I spent my life being very good at getting people to do that. I was brought to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous by my mom. My mom was a slipper in Alcoholics Anonymous for many, many years with varying lengths of sobriety. And she brought me to a meeting one night, not because I asked for help, not because I wanted help, not because I admitted having a problem, just because she thought if she left me alone I might get her evicted from another apartment. And I went into that meeting that night and I did not raise my hand because even if I had been an alcoholic, I wasn't going to join an organization that was allowing my mother to belong to it. You know, by the time I came to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the only person I hated more than my mother was myself. And I hated my mother for everything that had ever gone wrong in my life. You know, she was an alcoholic and it was all her fault, and, you know, take it from me, the short version, a lot had gone wrong. So I mean, I just was filled with anger and hatred for her and me and pretty much everybody else. But I came to that meeting, I didn't raise my hand, and there was a guy in that meeting that I admired more than anybody else in the whole world. And he was at that meeting, and a lot of you may not identify with the reasons that I admired this guy, you know. But this guy was he was a bar drinker in Venice. He was one of my mom's drinking buddies. And Paul had just gotten out of jail, and he had his knife. He was at the meeting. He just got, you know, he had his motorcycle parked outside. You know, if I had to tell you what I wanted out of life in one sentence when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, all I ever really wanted, you know, out of life was I wanted the ability to walk into a room full of strangers and have everyone there back away from me in terror. And when you're 87 pounds, that almost never happens, you know. That's sort of what I wanted out of life. Well, Paul was the kind of guy that if he'd been drinking, you know, I'd seen him in these bars in Venice. If Paul had been drinking and he came over to your table and he sat down there, you just got up and you let him have the table. Because you didn't know what Paul would do to get the table, you know. And so I looked at this man and I thought, he had achieved everything that I wanted out of life. I mean, he had achieved the ability to clear rooms and tables in some of the toughest bars, you know, that I had seen. And I'd seen a lot of bars, you know, and it just made a really big impression on me. You know, my mom had lost a lot of the fights that she was in, but I'd seen Paul win some, you know, and he was sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I came back to those meetings for a couple weeks. I did not raise my hand because, as I had already mentioned, I wasn't an alcoholic. And I spent all that time talking to Paul in between the meetings, explaining to Paul that I wasn't an alcoholic, that I couldn't possibly be an alcoholic, that I was far too young to be an alcoholic. There wasn't anything like my mother, who was just so alcoholic. And finally, Paul turned to me and he goes, you know what, June, I'm pretty new in this AA thing. And they've told me I can't diagnose anybody's disease but my own. He said, but in your case, I'm going to make an exception. He said, said, I've seen the way that you drink, and I've seen the way that you're using chemicals, and I happen to believe if you don't come into this program and take what these people have to offer you within a period of 6 months or less, you're going to be out on the streets, you're going to be shooting stuff, and you're going to be selling your ass. And I knew he wasn't trying to like make up something like a teacher might do in school. He was just talking about facts. He was talking about things that had happened and were beginning to happen in my life, and things that had happened and been happening in his life. And I thought a little bit about what he said, but I did not want to join Alcoholics Anonymous. I just didn't think it could be that bad, And yet in that 2-week period of time, absolutely every alternative but Alcoholics Anonymous was removed from my life. I was living with my mother at that time. I'd been living with her for a very short period of time. I've already told you a little bit about how I felt about me, how I felt about my mother. I was filled with anger and hatred, and I used to attack my mother. She used to fight back when she was drinking, but now she was sober and she didn't think she had to be attacked in her apartment anymore. And she asked me to leave, and I did. The rest of my family did not want me, and I was not welcome to come over, and I didn't bother trying. I had been in a lot of foster homes. I'd been thrown out of all of them, and none of them would take me back. I tried to get into the drug rehab and alcohol recovery homes that were in the Los Angeles area at that time. There were not very many. None of them would take me, some because of my age and some just because of my attitude. There was a program back then called Synanon, and I'd been attending some games at Synanon, and I tried to enroll there, and they wouldn't take me, and that was really bad because Synanon was actually crying out for membership at the time. They were about to shut down. But, I didn't let that bother me either. I thought, who cares? Who cares about programs, family, all that stuff, because the only thing that matters if you're a tough broad is your gang. And then one day as I walked down an alley, actually just a few blocks away from here, all 5 members of my gang beat me up. And so I found myself sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was 87 pounds, I had a black eye, I had a swollen lip, I had no shoes, wouldn't have worn them if I'd had them. I had no family, I had no place to stay, I had no money, and so I raised my hand in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't like, would you like to go to Hawaii today or join AA? I mean, it was just a lot easier than that, it was just go. And, when I raised my hand in that meeting, I know today that there were some people at that meeting that did not know about the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. In particular, the third tradition, the one that says the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. And the reason I know that those people did not know about the tradition is because when I raised my hand, they came up to me after the meeting, and a lot of the people knew who I was because my mom had been in and out of AA for so many years as a slipper, and they knew how old I was. And they came over to me and they told me I was too young to be an alcoholic. And they didn't want little kids sitting in their meetings while they talked about serious things. And they told me if I came back, they'd get together and ask me to leave. And I just thought AA didn't want me either. And that was okay with me, because I didn't want me either. And I hadn't for a long, long time. I fell back on the #1 answer that I'd been using since I was 5 years old. I went over to a friend of my mother's. I went into her bathroom, which is the first place I went at anyone's house I ever visited, found the kind of pills that I needed to kill myself, and I took enough of them to do it one more time. And then I went to a meeting. And it was at the old Culver City Club. And I went to that meeting, and by the time I got to that meeting, I could not stand and I could not sit, and I laid in the meeting, and I don't know why they called on me, because, most of the meetings I go today, they never call on people who are laying in the meeting to talk on. But they realized I needed to be in a hospital, and that was where I woke up, with the doctor explaining to me that the pills I had taken were to slow down my heart. And had I been there 5 or 10 minutes later, I would have been in a coma that they probably couldn't have brought me out of. And I really don't know why that overdose was any different than all the others that I'd inflicted upon myself. I just know that it was, because since that time, one day at a time, I haven't taken anything that affects me from the neck up, and that's how I personally define sobriety. When I came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, this may not surprise you, given some of the things I've already said, I came in here with a bad attitude. I did not like women. I didn't like me. I didn't like my mother. Figured any of the other women around here were probably sort of like some of us, and I didn't like them. I didn't like to sit next to women. I didn't like to hold hands with women. I did not like to certainly hug women, and I did not like listening to women speakers, which always makes me feel better because I know there are never as many people listening to me in a room as it looks like. And the men that I had known in my life, most of the men that I had known were extremely violent. Figured they were alcoholic, and I figured the guys in here probably were like that too, and so they scared me, and I didn't want anything to do with them either. And of course I had a problem because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, all we had were men and women, and I didn't like any of them. But I went to 21 meetings a week, for the first about 3 years that I was sober. I had a commitment at almost all of those meetings, not because I wanted to get a gold star in AA, but because I had absolutely no place else to go and nothing else to do, and I didn't know if this was going to work for me. And I was not one of those people that stayed in Alcoholics Anonymous because I was afraid I'd go back out on the streets and die. I tried to die as long and as hard as I could out there. You know, what I was afraid of is that I'd be able to go back out there and continue to live the way that I was living. And by the time I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, I could not go on breathing in and out, hating myself any more than I did when I came here. So I just could not imagine going back out there and continuing to live the way that I was living. So I got very active in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. My home group was the Monday Night Venice group, and it was the best meeting in the world for me. It was a great meeting, very active meeting, taught me a lot about traditions, a lot about service. You know, I would, you know, but I still, you know, I kind of had my bad attitude. I took up smoking. I'd always smoked, but I took up smoking more when I got into the program, and I started smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and I lit all of them myself. Occasionally someone would hold a match, and I let them hold it as long as they liked, but they never lit my cigarette with it. And after I'd been sober a little while, I took up smoking cigars, and then later a pipe. I did not wear shoes most of the first couple years that I was sober. I wore some chains on my wrists and my ankle. I had a jacket, and on the back it said, "Do unto others," and then split. It was my own spiritual philosophy. I had a very limited vocabulary when I came to AA. It consisted almost solely of profanity. There were a few exceptions, the and mother. And I found a lot of people in AA were very offended by that kind of language. So I tried to use it more when they got near me. And, I mean, I want to tell you, you know, there were times I could sit in a meeting almost this crowded and have an entire row all to myself, because there were a lot of people that just didn't want anything to do with me, but they didn't throw me out, you know. I used to be the greeter at the Tuesday 2+2 Westwood meeting. And I'd stand there with my motorcycle jacket and chains and cigar, barefoot, welcoming the newcomers as they came to AA. Sometimes I'd hear somebody whisper to him, "You see, if you keep drinking, you can end up like that," you know. And you know, when I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, people were guessing my age at 37. I was 13. And you know, the interesting thing is that tonight, as I stand here, I'm 47 years old. I've been sober 34 and a half years. And, you know, I want to be really clear for anybody who's new or anybody who hasn't been around for very long. I never planned on staying that long. Let me just assure you that if they'd given me a choice on, you know, the living thing, I would have checked the no box. I mean, keep that in mind. I just, you know, I didn't want to go on. You know, I wanted out. And so it's just unbelievable to me. And you know what's really unbelievable to me is that I feel about 1,000 years younger tonight than I did in the early years of my sobriety. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous so old, and if you haven't felt that way or you don't feel that way, then I'm not going to be able to explain it to you. I was old. I was done. I didn't have any dreams. You know, there wasn't anything that I could look forward to in my life. It was over. It was done. You know, I figured I was just going to kind of do time in endless meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and it's amazing to me that the hope that was here in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was able to touch me, but it was. You know, I never believed when I'd hear these people talk about they'd come in and they'd, you know, gotten to a point of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, and they'd lost all of their self-worth and their self-respect, and they came into this program and they began to do the things that were suggested that they do and get active and try to apply these spiritual principles, and that somewhere along the line they got to a point where, you know, they could walk down the street, look other people in the eye, feel like one of God's kids. And, you know, I would listen to those things and I'd think, well, that may have happened for them. They were very convincing people, and I really didn't think they were all lying. But I knew that wasn't going to happen for me. But I did believe that maybe if I came in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and I tried this thing 110%, maybe someday when I was walking down the street and I happened to catch a reflection of myself in one of those storefront windows, which was the only place I planned on catching a reflection of myself because I wasn't looking in any mirrors, I thought maybe I won't feel like throwing up at what I've done and where I've been and the places, you know, that I've come from. that was enough hope to keep me coming to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. It's so interesting to me. I had a sponsor, and, you know, I'm looking at Jean over there, and I'm thinking about my sponsor, Gail Wilson. And, you know, Gail was a woman, and it's so fascinating to me because whenever I think about Gail, I think about what it says in the book when it says, we are people who normally would not mix. You know, there's just no way I can imagine a person like me and a person like my sponsor, Gail Wilson, you know, getting together, but for a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, Gail, well, I already told you I didn't like women, but it seemed like at those 21 meetings I went to every week that Gail Wilson talked at about 18 of them every week. It just drove me crazy. And so I thought maybe if I ask this woman to be my sponsor, I can find out ahead of time where she's talking, and then I won't have to go hear her. And so I did. I asked her to be my sponsor. And, you know, Gail, I mean, we were just so different. You know, Gail had come from a warm, loving family in the South. I hated people like that, you know. You know, she had a car. I mean, we had never, you know, had a car. I mean, Gail had traveled all around the world. She'd gone to college. You know, I ran away once from Venice. I made it as far east as Culver City. You know, I mean, not only did Gail not use the kind of language I was using, she didn't know what a lot of the words I was using meant. You know, I mean, I had to, like, explain when I was, like, insulting someone what that really, you know, translate it for her. And her home group was the Thursday night Brentwood group, which is one of my regular meetings. And I would go over to the meeting, you know, barefoot. And I'd see Gail over at the meeting, and she'd say, look, June, don't sit next to me at the meeting tonight, because I can't take the cigar smoke. And I'd turn to walk away, and she'd say, and not only that, please don't tell anyone that I am your sponsor. And that was fine with me, because I really didn't want anybody to know I was hanging out with someone lame, you know, like her. I mean, she did all kinds of, you know, weird things. I mean, she had even been seen on numerous occasions in public wearing pink. I mean, I didn't even sit in a row where anybody wore pink until I was like 10 years sober, just in case anybody thought I was, you know, like near pink, you know? You can't do the pink thing. So anyway, I came into the program. I have a 7th grade education. I dropped out of school after I got sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I mean, I dropped out before, but you know, I tried to go back, sort of. I mean, I really did try. Gail really wanted me to try, and I did try. But, you know, they wanted you to wear shoes, not smoke in class. Yeah, I had this attitude. I mean, there were a lot of problems. It just wasn't really working. So instead, I went to lots and lots of meetings, and I got the kind of jobs that you can get with the 7th grade education. And I got and stayed very active in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And after I'd been sober for a while, I really wanted to learn how to get a driver's license, you know. And so I went to sign up for that driver's ed class and at the city college. And while I was there, I don't even know how this happened exactly, but I was filling out a paper and I saw this class, and somebody was explaining to me that it was a dummy English class. That's what they called it. And I wasn't able to read anymore because of all the damage that I'd done to my brain. I mean, I could read the words, but even after a couple years sober, I couldn't hold a whole sentence in my head and have it mean anything. And so I thought maybe if I go to take this class, maybe I'll learn how to make my brain work again, or, you know, whatever. So I took this class, and I finished those classes, and I ended up taking a few other classes, and then I ended up getting a job on campus and taking some more classes. And after a couple of years, you know, they call me in and they go, hey, you know, you've completed all the requirements for what they call an AA, a college AA degree. And I was like, hey, that's a nice name for a college degree. You know, I never plan on getting a college degree, you know. And I graduated from the city college. And when I graduated, you know, they announced that I was graduating 3rd in my class out of like 487 people, you know. And I used to stand at the Tuesday night Westwood meeting when I was the greeter. And after I'd introduced myself to 2 or 3 people, I wasn't able to remember which name was mine. You know, because I'd get confused. I'd heard 3 names, and one of them was mine, and I wasn't sure whether I was Kathy anymore or June. You know, it's like my brain just didn't work. You know, and there just isn't any doubt for me that only Alcoholics Anonymous could have made that happen for someone like me. I wasn't capable of it. I just didn't have the brain power to be doing that. Anyway, and I went on to school after that, and I went on and graduated from a university, and after that I did this footwork, because that's what Gail told me I needed to do, and I did the footwork to make a dream of mine come true that I'd come up with. I'd come up with a dream, and I went ahead and I filled out the papers and sent them off, and I got a telegram, and it's been, I don't know, I think almost 20 years ago now, I don't know, and maybe more actually. And they said I'd been chosen as one of 300 out of 3,000 applicants to go to law school. Now, I'll tell you, I always planned on spending a lot of time in court, but never on that side of the table, And I was able to go to law school and to show up and to try and practice the things that I'd been taught here in Alcoholics Anonymous, about one day at a time, and trying to do my best, and not give up, and not let the fear take over, and I really learned a lot about God's kids, because I had always thought I wasn't as good as a lot of these people. These people, their parents were judges, and their dads were, this, and their moms were that, and whatever. And by the time I got to law school, I'd been sober long enough where I really began to feel like I was one of God's kids, and it just really didn't matter where I came from or where they came from, you know what I mean? It was just all the same, and I just kept showing up. And not too long before I was scheduled to graduate from law school, it became very clear that my sponsor, Gail Wilson, was dying of cancer. And Gail was in her 40s, and I spent a lot of time in the hospital with her those last couple months. And while we were there, we talked, Gail and I, and I said, Gail, why'd you become my sponsor? And she said, very clearly, she goes, because I was told to not say no to an AA request. She said, when you asked me to be your sponsor, she said, I knew you weren't going to make it. She said, but I didn't say no because I'd been told I shouldn't say no, And while I'd sit there and we'd talk, these different nurses would come in to give her chemo treatments and her different things, and she'd stop the nurses and she'd say, hey, Nurse Smith, Nurse, I want you to meet Junie. She said, Junie's like a daughter to me, and she's going to be an attorney. I thought this is so funny. This is the same woman who used to say, don't sit next to me at the meeting and don't tell anyone that I am your sponsor. Now she's introducing me to strangers, who have no interest in meeting me. But what we talked about while we were there, Gail and I, was, we talked about why she didn't give up on me, She goes, I remember you calling and you go, I'm going to take a class, Gail, over at the little city college. She said, I knew you weren't going to finish that class. You were the biggest flake. You were a couple years sober. You were still one of the biggest flakes I'd ever known. You hadn't finished anything, She said, other than an AA commitment, you could not follow through on anything. And she said, I knew you weren't going to finish, but I didn't say anything. She said, and then you called me up after that, and you said, I think I'm going to take some more classes. And she said, I didn't say anything. She said, then you called me up one time and you said, Gail, I think I'm going to go to law school. I want to be a lawyer. She said, I had to force myself not to laugh out loud. She said, I knew that wasn't happening, but she didn't say anything. And so we talked about, why didn't she say anything? Clearly Gail never believed in June. Never for 1 minute did she think June was going to accomplish anything. But she always believed in Alcoholics Anonymous, She always believed that things can happen here that don't make any sense. And I just want to assure you, if you're new or if you've been sober for a while, just like I think it was Paulette, is that your name? That said, you don't have, somebody that took a cake was saying, you don't have to drink to start over here. And thank God. Because I've started over more times than I'd like to mention, But what I want to say is that, really very simply, is that, I have no idea what my path is going to be, and I've had no idea what the miracles were going to be in my life, And I need the old-timers who are here, and Bobby and I was talking with him, and I need these people that are here now, and then the ones that have gone on ahead of me, to remind me and kind of lead me on the path. And I hope that, that I can do the same for you. Thanks for inviting me.
I would like to thank Chaz for Chapter 5 and Brian for the 12 traditions. Are there any secretary's announcements?
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm an alcoholic named Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Filling in for Robert again. If you have a commitment at this meeting, could you please stand? Let's give the people with commitments an applause. Thank them. Because of time, we'll save the intros for later. You have a
I'm Jim, an alcoholic.
Hey, Jay.
And representing hospitals and institutions. Great program. We help spread the message of recovery in places where, well, they can't get out. So please see me if you want to get involved, speak on a panel, or, get some service commitments.
Thanks, Jay. We'll save it for later, next week. Patty, how'd we do?
Patty, alcoholic, your treasurer. Unfortunately, thank you. Somebody took the coffee and it went south again. So our expenses were $141. We collected $101. So I'm going to put this basket up here. So if you could throw whatever extra you have in here, thank you.
Somebody took the coffee again. Cleanup? The cleanup guy here? God, I saw him standing out front. We have an open commitment for water person. Second week I've supplied water, and there was another one, another commitment that's open. Come up and see me afterwards if you need a commitment, or see me next week, or see Robert next week. One of us. Quick funny story about June. I recorded the rodeo meeting, and some girls from Canada came down looking through the CDs. Also, this talk was recorded. If you need a CD of tonight's talk, come see me afterwards. And these girls from Canada says, "Oh, June G." I says, "Yeah." She says, and I'd heard another girl that was sponsored by Gail say that she'd passed away. And well, she was talking about Gail, but I thought she was talking about June. And I told these girls, "Oh yeah, she passed away." Well, it was the night June was speaking, so I had to run back and tell these girls, June's very much alive. And in fact, she's talking tonight. And I want to thank you, June. I just love your talk. Thanks. Okay, did I forget anything important? Court cards will be signed up here. Make a line off of this way. Birthdays were Natalie, Paulette, Sean, David, Cindy, and Devora. Congratulations. I'll turn it back over to Rebecca. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, literature.
If you want anything, see me afterwards. Thanks.
This has been a regular Wednesday night speaker meeting. Thank you for coming and keep coming back. Now, after a moment of silent meditation for the alcoholic who still suffers, would Carol lead us in the Lord's Prayer, please?